We are beginning a brand new study tonight on how to live a happy life. This is a study on the book of Ecclesiastes. Yes, I know, Ecclesiastes. That's a difficult one for a lot of people to understand, but I believe you are going to profit tremendously from this study. Let me give you a scripture text, Ecclesiastes, the first chapter, verses 1 through 3. The words of the preacher, this is the words, of course, of Solomon, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities. All is vanity. What profit has a man from all his labor in which he toils under the sun? Wow, what a way to start a book. I must confess, in the beginning of this book, this is probably one of the most difficult Bible studies that I have ever done. It took me 2 or 3 years just to get this where I felt that I had a handle on it and could teach it accurately. My controversy that I had with the book was almost everything that you read about the book of Ecclesiastes is negative. And my problem is, the Bible is not a negative book. God is not a negative God. He is a positive God, and the Bible is very positive. So I'm thinking, how can we have a negative book right in the middle of a positive book? And then one day I begin to see the secrets of Ecclesiastes. And I think you're going to enjoy this immensely. The way I would approach this of course, is Solomon in his later years, and I really believe this shows that Solomon probably repented before he died of all the multiple transgressions that he committed. I think this book shows that the man comes full circle, and when he comes to the end of his life, he realized this is the whole duty of man: reverence God and obey his commandments. And so it gives me hope for Solomon that he did make peace with God before he met his Creator. The book of Ecclesiastes, the way I would approach it, it's kind of like a freshman college class. And you have this old president of the college that is giving the wisdom to this new freshman class how to live a productive life. And so that's why I'm calling it How to Live a Happy Life. This first lesson, I'm entitling it, Don't Burst Your Bubble. And you'll see why as we begin in this first chapter of Ecclesiastes. Don't burst your bubble. Now, we do have syllabus that are available for you, so if you please contact the office, we'll be happy to see that you can have a copy of the syllabus as you do your own study. When Solomon begins his study, it's kind of like trying to understand life, and it's like trying to solve a very difficult puzzle. How do you make a profit out of life? That's what Solomon is pursuing all the way through this book. This book is Solomon's look at what makes life profitable, what makes it worth living. And he's going to take us through some many extremes. This is one of the things that I came to understand in the writings of Ecclesiastes is different than any other book in the Bible. In fact, most books of the Bible, it's a continual adding to what you know. 2 plus 2 equals 4 plus 2 equals 6. That is not the way that he comes to his conclusion. No, rather he goes from one extreme to another extreme and then draws his conclusion right down the middle. And when I begin to understand that, his way of reasoning, it helped me to understand his book. He is desperately searching for the meaning of life. What is it that makes life profitable? What is it that's going to make it productive, make it worth living? And in this study, he limits himself to humanistic reasoning. He deliberately leaves God out of the equation in his pursuit of meaning. So you can see why he goes through this very morbid, very negative statement, vanity of vanities, all is vanity, says the preacher. Sounds like some preachers that I have met. But he comes to the conclusion at the end of it that life is only worth living if it's worth living with God. Now, he uses this phrase again and again. I read it in your hearing. It's what he calls life under the sun. Not above the sun, that's where God is, but under the sun. In other words, limiting his thinking to planet Earth, to humanistic reasoning. That's what he is going to do. Let me give you a diagram that I think will help you to understand what I'm going to talk about here. If you put truth and a solid line beneath it, truth, and there is what we're trying to attain, the truth, just the truth. And you have man that is attempting to discover truth. All that he can use is his natural senses, his mind. He's limited to himself in trying to discover truth. He runs into a barrier. He comes to a dead end. There is no way that he's going to be able to do it without divine revelation. Divine revelation that comes from God that breaks in on our lives. Or another way of saying this, we need God to break through our limited knowledge with revelation. Oh, I believe that is the truth. And that is the conclusion that Solomon comes to at the end of his book, is the only way that we're going to live a productive life is to live it with revelation from God. And so all of us are in need of this. But Solomon is limiting himself to his own senses, his own mind, to try to understand. And of course, you discover that without God, there is this dark outlook without God. It's a negative, a very negative thing, and that's why so many of the writers of Ecclesiastes come up with negative books. But the conclusion is, at the end of the book, there is a bright outlook with God. If you're living with God, it's a happy ending. And so that's why the emphasis of the book is how to live a happy life. Now, Solomon has this unique gift that God has given him. It's what was called a gift of wisdom. A gift of wisdom. And it was not divine wisdom. No, it's talking about what we would call a political science. He understood better than anybody else the pursuit of politics and how to bring countries together and how to maximize the trade for his country, because he was on a major trade route. And so Solomon uses this gift of wisdom that he has from God. But here's what he discovers. Wisdom is no substitute for a relationship with God. In fact, I wonder how different Solomon's life would have been if, instead of asking for wisdom, he had asked for love, a loving relationship with God. That's the primary difference between King Solomon and King David. David messed up just like Solomon made so many mistakes. But David was able to recover because he had a heart after God. Solomon asked for wisdom. And what he discovers at the end of his life is that human wisdom is not a substitute for a relationship with God. And this is why the psalmist tells us in Psalm 14 and verse 1, the person who leaves God out of his life is living like a fool. Now, the word fool there does not mean an ignoramus, someone that, is an idiot, doesn't know anything. No. The word fool there simply means no moral compass. There's no way that you can make the wise decisions that you need to make ultimately without a relationship with God. To leave God out of our lives is the worst mistake that we could ever make, because it's only God that can give us and give our life true meaning. You find this in 1 Corinthians, the first chapter, verses 17 through 25, that Jesus Christ becomes to us everything that we need in our relationship with God and others. We're going to find it in God. We'll not find it outside of God. Now, let me break this lesson down into three main parts that I want to talk about. First, let's talk about the puzzle of life. The puzzle of life. And as I said, life can be a big puzzle, a big riddle. There's some key words here that Solomon uses again and again that clue us in on the answer to our question. If we're going to make a profit with life, we have to understand the word wisdom. He uses it 52 times in this short book. So it's quite obvious this is a book on wisdom, how to be wise, how to make wise decisions. And it refers to an intelligent, reverent attitude. That's what he's talking about. Then he uses the word man. Again, 47 times you find man, and he's simply talking about mankind. He's not leaving the ladies out here. He's just simply talking about human beings. How are we going to be productive with our life? A third word that I see is the word God. He refers to God, but I find it interesting. He only uses the Hebrew word Elohim. Elohim. He uses it 38 times. That shows you the emphasis. But never once does he use the sacred covenant name that all the Jews used when talking about God, the word Yahweh. Yahweh. He never uses that. The word Elohim is more like a generic word that's used by all the nations. They would all talk about Elohim, speaking about God, but they don't talk about Yahweh. And Solomon, because he is leaving God out of the equation and trying to find meaning without God, life under the sun, never uses the sacred name for God. Then the word vanity. Vanity, you've already seen it here in these opening verses. Vanity, 37 times. It means futility. It refers to emptiness and emptiness. And then you find the word labor, 36 times. He's talking about how to make a profit with your life, how to take your work and turn it into something that's productive. But the word he uses for labor is the word that literally refers to the negative side of work, like being on the treadmill. It's kind of like the cliche, I owe, so off to work I go. That's what he's talking about here. The treadmill activity, always busy, but what did you accomplish? And then finally, the sixth thing that you see over and over repeated again and again is this phrase, under the sun. 38 times he refers to under the sun. And he's basically talking about a life that is lived without God. A life without God, under the sun, not above the sun, under the sun. And so these key words help us to understand the book of Ecclesiastes. If we're going to understand what Solomon is seeking for, what he is pursuing here, these key words help us to understand it. And I would encourage you in your own Bible studies, it's good for you to go through and just count the words. If you'll see how many times a word is used in a book, many times that's the key to understanding, to unlocking what the writer is talking about. And so those are the key words. Now, let's go to the second part of this lesson, what I'm going to call the problem of life. The problem of life. This is where Solomon makes this statement. He says, vanity of vanities, all is vanity, says the preacher. And as I said, I've met a few preachers like that. They're, for some reason or other, they tended to be very negative in life. This is an outburst of futility. He is just exploding with vanity of vanities. There's nothing that is productive. Now, this word vanity, he is saying a life without God is the ultimate emptiness. And he repeats himself again for emphasis. In other words, when you read vanity of vanities, holy of holies, that is the Hebrew way of expressing the highest superlative. It's saying this is the ultimate. And he's talking here about the ultimate of vanities. Now this is where I got the title for this lesson called Don't Burst Your Bubble. because the word vanity in the Hebrew is literally a word that means that. It simply means the bursting of a soap bubble. Just like every child has played games, blowing the bubbles and then popping the bubbles, that's what he's talking about. You touch the soap bubble and it just bursts, and there is nothing that is left of the soap bubble. That's what the Hebrew word vanity actually means, bursting the soap bubble. Vanity is all that we have left when a soap bubble bursts. Now, what a clear graphic picture of a man that is frustrated with life under the sun, a life without God. It has no meaning, and that's what he is saying. And he is going to take us through the pursuits of all the different things that he experiments to try to find meaning to life. So vanity, it's like bursting your bubble and there's nothing that is left. There's nothing that's productive. There's no profit to show. That's what he's talking about. So it's the picture of an empty, worthless life that is wasted without any real sense of purpose. I don't know if you've ever seen that or not, but I've seen that, and it's one of the most tragic things that you can ever experience in life. A dear friend of mine that was called to do a funeral, a family that he knew, that asked him if he would do the funeral for a man that did not know God, did not go to church, had lived a very tragic life, and he asked if the family had any request, and they only had one request, and they said, "Would you please have the song sung for us? Wasted years, wasted years. Oh, what vanity." Now, this is what he's talking about. A person that has lived their life, but they have nothing to show for it. There's nothing but just the emptiness of the soap bubble that burst. That's what he's talking about. And no wonder he gives this outburst, vanity of vanities. See, he's desperately searching for something that will give meaning to life. And Solomon is not a nobody. Solomon is one of the greatest kings that ever lived. And here, this man is searching desperately for a meaning to life. See, life has some big questions that demand answers. And I've seen so many people that go through life like, they're not thinking. They're just, because they keep repeating the same mistakes again and again and again. They're learning nothing from what they're going through. If you learn something, if you get an education at least, you know what not to do. And many times that's where we begin. The basic level of knowledge is knowing what not to do. You don't want to do that because here's what's going to happen. But so many people live vanity because they go right on repeating the same mistake again and again and again, making no profit, learning nothing. Let me give you three major questions here that every person must sooner or later answer these questions. Who am I? Who am I? I'm not somebody else. I must discover, who am I? What are the gifts that God has given me? What is it that I can do and be productive with my life? I can't do everything, but I can do something. So who am I? The second one is, why am I here? Why am I here? Life is not an accident looking for a place to happen. This is one of the things that just really bothers me about the evolutionists that talk about dancing to our own DNA. They're saying life has no meaning whatsoever. If it has no meaning, then you are not living. You're simply existing, my friend. Why am I here? And then thirdly, if I'm here, then where am I going? Now, all of us have faced those questions sooner or later, at some time or another. It starts in childhood as we start looking for answers to life. And this is what Solomon is going through. So the book of Ecclesiastes, the book is written like a roadmap that's on the pursuit to happiness. And he is giving us guides of, don't go down that street, that's a dead-end street, and here's why, and he will give us the reasons. Here's where you need to go. You need to turn at this place. And it's like a roadmap on the pursuit to happiness. Now, the truth is, if you're looking for a guide, look for somebody that knows the way. They know where they are going. There's nothing like following someone that doesn't know where they're going. I mean, and the problem is you're going to run out of time. You don't have time to make all the mistakes. No, learn from somebody else. And that's what Solomon is doing for us. Solomon lived an extraordinary life. I mean, it's what we call today bigger than life. Here is this man that lived in the golden era. I mean, this man is at the top of his world. He's not just king, he's king over kings. He had an extraordinary life. He is uniquely qualified to guide us and to lead us through this pursuit. This is a man that had it all. He lived at the top of his golden world. None of his drinking vessels were made out of silver. They were all made out of gold. This man had it all. But as he looks back over his life, he concludes, a life that is lived without God is nothing. It's like the soap bubble that just burst. Wow, what a conclusion. Now, let me give you the third area I want to talk about in this lesson on Don't Burst Your Bubble. The profit of life. The profit of life. How can we make a profit? This is where he comes up with this word, labor. What did we profit from all our labor? See, everybody's busy, but that doesn't mean we're being productive. There's a difference in being busy and producing something. The word that he uses here for profit, and the word labor, it actually is the opposite of this word vanity. Don't burst your bubble. Labor. The word that he's using here is a word that means a surplus or that which is left over. In other words, you didn't leave planet Earth like you found it. You made a difference. You did something good. You helped someone. You made a change in somebody's life for good. That's what he's talking about. Did you make a profit with your life? With all your labor, with all your working and toil, did your life make a difference? I see so many people today that deal with depression, and I think this is one of the things that a root problem is. So many people that they really can't point to anything and said, this is what I did with my life. I made a difference in somebody's life. I helped somebody. And because of that, they feel nothing but emptiness. It's like Solomon is asking, during all of the ups and downs of life, with all of its hopes and fears, did we gain anything? Did we make a profit? Did we make a difference? Those are good questions, and that's what he's going to pursue through this whole book. He's going to use human reasoning. He's going to use human wisdom. He's going to look at the world of politics. He's going to examine all these different facets of life to see if he can find something that has meaning, something that makes a profit. Jesus said something very similar to this when Jesus said, "What profit is it to a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul?" Matthew 16:26. That is a good question, and that is given to us by the Creator. What profit is it if you gain everything in this life, but you leave here without your soul being right with God, an emptiness on the inside, that you are just a shell of a man or a shell of a woman. That is not the way God intended for us to live. See, there's something in the human spirit, something that forces us to seek for answers in a world we have never known. Something that tells us there's got to be more to life than just this. There's got to be something that makes life worth living. And that's what Solomon is seeking after. See, all of us inside, we know that there is more to life than meets the eye. And we long to understand what it is. What is it that is there that causes us to get out of bed in the morning? What is it that causes us to go back to work again? What is it that motivates us and keeps us going? That's what he's talking about. We long to understand what we cannot see with our natural vision. There's got to be more to life than just what meets the eye. What Solomon discovers, it's only in God that we can ultimately find the answers to the riddle of life. It's only in God. A life that is lived with God is satisfying, but a life without God is empty. And so the question that Solomon puts right before all of us to answer is, have you found the answer to the riddle of life? Then follow me through the book of Ecclesiastes as Solomon pursues this question again and again. What is it that makes life worth living? Why are we here? And we will discover the purpose in this study on how to live a happy life.